Okay, so, our amazing listeners are always sending us the most interesting stuff. And lately we've been getting a lot of questions about this pentadecanoic acid.
Which is also known as C15.
Right, C15, exactly.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's this fatty acid that keeps popping up more and more in all these discussions about living longer and, metabolic health. And they've sent some really cool sources that I've been looking at too.
Yeah, some interesting research for sure.
Yeah, and I think what we want to do today is really cut through all the heavy science stuff.
Yeah, get to the heart of it.
And figure out, what's the big deal about C15? Why is everyone making such a fuss about it?
And why is it suddenly like the hot new thing?
Exactly, especially because it's being talked about with all these big players in the longevity world, like metformin.
Oh yeah, like metformin and rapamycin.
Yeah, so let's dive right in and start with the basics. What exactly is C15?
Okay, so at its core, C15 is a saturated fatty acid.
Okay, now when I hear saturated fat, I kind of,
I know, right? We've been conditioned to think bad.
Yeah, exactly.
But C15 is kind of unique because it's got this special structure with a 15-carbon chain, and that's what makes it stand out.
15 carbons, okay.
Yeah, so think of it like this. Our cell membranes, which are like the walls of our cells, right?
Yeah.
They need to be strong.
Yeah, to protect the cell.
Exactly. But they also need to be flexible.
Oh, okay.
And saturated fats, because of their throat chains, they contribute to that strength.
Oh, so it's like building a sturdy wall.
Yeah, exactly. Like bricks in a wall.
Okay, that makes sense.
And C15, because it's this 15-carbon saturated fat, it plays a crucial role in keeping those membranes strong and intact, which can then help protect them from damage from things like oxidative stress, which is a huge factor in aging.
So it's not the kind of saturated fat we should be afraid of.
Right. It's actually beneficial.
Now, you mentioned that it's an odd-chain fatty acid. What makes that so important?
That's a great question. Most of the fatty acids we eat and that are in our bodies, they have an even number of carbon atoms. But C15 has this odd number 15, and that means it's processed by our bodies in a totally different way.
Interesting.
It takes a different route, a different biochemical pathway.
Okay.
And that unique processing, that's where a lot of these cool health benefits seem to come from.
Wow, so it's like this tiny little difference in its structure.
At the molecular level.
Yeah, it can lead to these big changes in how our bodies work.
Exactly. It's fascinating, right?
Totally. Okay, so we've got this odd chain saturated fatty acid helping to build strong cell walls. But now let's talk about the really exciting stuff, the stuff that all your sources were highlighting, like this potential link to longevity.
Okay, let's get into it.
They mentioned C15 activating longevity pathways. Can you explain what that means?
Absolutely. So the research that's out there right now is suggesting that C15 can actually influence two really important pathways that are known to be involved in aging, AMPK and mTOR.
Okay, two big names in the aging world.
Huge players.
So let's start with AMPK. What is that all about?
AMPK stands for AMP activated protein kinase. And think of it as your cell's energy sensor.
Okay, the fuel gauge.
Exactly. When your cells are running low on energy, AMPK kicks in and says, hey, we need to conserve energy. And this activation of AMPK has been linked to a whole bunch of benefits for longevity across tons of different organisms.
So it's like the cell is saying, time to be more efficient, and somehow that translates to us living longer.
Yeah, in a nutshell.
Okay.
AMPK basically makes our bodies better at using energy. It helps us break down fats and sugars more efficiently. And it even helps to reduce inflammation, which is really important.
Wow, so it's like a total system overhaul.
Pretty much. And what's really interesting is that studies show that C15 can actually activate AMPK similar to how metformin does.
Oh, wow. Metformin, the diabetes drug.
Right, which is also being studied for its potential to extend lifespan.
That's a huge comparison right off the bat.
It is.
Okay, so that's AMPK. Now, what about mTOR?
All right, so mTOR stands for mammalian target of rapamycin. It's another key pathway. But this one is more involved in cell growth and division and making new proteins.
Okay, so important stuff.
Essential processes, especially when we're young. But as we get older, too much mTOR activity can actually speed up the aging process.
Oh, wow. So it's like a double-edged sword.
Exactly. And that's why researchers are so excited about things that can inhibit mTOR, because dialing it down has been shown to actually make animals live longer in lab studies.
Okay, I'm starting to see where this is going.
And here's where it gets really, really interesting. C15 has shown that it can inhibit mTOR in the lab, much like rapamycin does.
Rapamycin, another big name in longevity.
Right, a drug that's being studied for its anti-aging potential.
So it's like C15 can tap into that same pathway.
It seems that way.
Wow. So we've got C15 potentially influencing these two major longevity pathways.
and in ways that are similar to compounds that are already known to have an effect.
That's a powerful combination. Okay, now one of the most interesting things I saw in your sources was this study with dolphins.
Ah, yes, the dolphin study.
What was that all about?
So researchers with the U.S. Navy, they were monitoring the health of a group of dolphins, and they noticed something really strange. The dolphins that had lower levels of C15 in their diets were having more age-related health problems.
Oh, wow. So even dolphins need C15.
It seems that way.
So what happened when they started feeding the dolphins more C15?
Well, they actually increased the amount of C15-rich fish in their diets.
Oh, okay.
And they saw some positive changes in several markers that are linked to aging and disease.
So their health improved.
It seemed to, and while, of course, dolphins aren't humans, this study was like a huge first clue that C15 might be really important for long-term health.
A clue from the ocean.
I love it.
Okay, so that led to more research looking at metabolic and cardiovascular benefits, right?
Exactly. And they started doing studies in animals like mice and rabbits.
Okay, and what did they find?
They found that C15 could actually help lower both cholesterol and blood glucose levels.
Wow, two really important things.
Wow. Right. And in these studies, when they gave the animals C15 supplements, they saw those levels go down, and they also saw a decrease in inflammatory molecules like MCP1 and IL-6.
So less inflammation, that's great.
Yeah, it suggests that C15 might have a really important role in keeping our metabolism healthy.
It all starts to connect. Now, what about that rabbit study that looked at red blood cells? That one really caught my attention.
Oh, yeah, that was a cool one. They found that when they gave rabbits C15, it actually improved both the number and the distribution of their red blood cells.
Now, why is that a good thing?
Well, healthy red blood cells are essential for carrying oxygen throughout our bodies. And when we have more of them and they're distributed well, it means that oxygen is getting where it needs to go more efficiently, which can have a huge impact on things like cardiovascular function and energy levels.
So it's not just about the numbers like cholesterol, it's about how well our cells are actually working.
Exactly. It's about the quality of those cells.
All right, now let's talk about the powerhouses of our cells, the mitochondria. How does C15 affect them?
So this is where that odd chain structure of C15 becomes really important. Again, C15 helps our mitochondria function properly through a process called beta oxidation.
Beta oxidation, what is that?
It's basically how fatty acids are broken down to create energy inside the mitochondria.
Okay, our cells' little energy factories.
Exactly. Now, most fatty acids, they're broken down into 2 carbon units. But because C15 has this odd number of carbons, it produces something called propionyl-CoA when it's broken down.
Propionyl-CoA.
Yeah, it's a mouthful, but it's really important because it then gets converted into succinate, which is a key player in the Krebs cycle.
The Krebs cycle, isn't that the main energy production process in our cells?
Exactly. It's like the central engine of our mitochondria. And by feeding directly into that cycle, C15 helps our mitochondria produce energy more efficiently.
Oh, wow. So it's like giving them a super boost.
And healthy mitochondria that are working well, they produce less harmful byproducts like free radicals. So C15 could also help reduce oxidative stress at the cellular level.
Less damage.
Yeah.
That's what we want.
Right. And that's crucial for both healthy aging and just overall feeling good.
So by giving our cells this odd chain fatty acid, we're basically helping them run cleaner and smoother.
Exactly.
Now, we've talked about a lot of animal studies. What about the research in humans? What have they found?
Okay, so the research in humans is still in the early stages,
Yeah.
but there are some really exciting trends emerging.
Okay, tell me more.
So we have a few different types of human studies that are giving us some clues. For instance, there are observational studies where researchers look at large groups of people and their diets over time.
Okay, large-scale stuff.
Right. And some of these studies have found a connection between higher C15 levels and a lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes.
Interesting, because I know in the past we were told to avoid full-fat dairy, but it sounds like there's more to the story.
Yeah, it's more nuanced than we originally thought.
What other types of studies have they done?
Well, they've also done controlled intervention trials where they actually give people C15 supplements and see what happens.
Okay, and what have they found?
One study looked at people with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Okay.
And the participants who were given C15 along with a Mediterranean diet, they actually saw improvements in their LDL cholesterol levels.
So their bad cholesterol went down?
Yeah. And they also had some positive changes in their gut bacteria.
So it's affecting the gut too?
Yeah. It's fascinating how interconnected everything is.
Totally. And you mentioned a study that looked at biological aging.
Oh, yeah. This one was really cool. They analyzed people's lipid profiles, which is basically all the fats in their blood. And they compared that to measures of biological aging using things called epigenetic clocks.
Epigenetic clocks, what are those?
They're like these biological clocks that can estimate a person's true biological age based on changes in their DNA, like phenoage and grimmage.
Wow, so they can tell how old you are on the inside.
Exactly. And what they found was that people with higher C15 levels had a slower rate of biological aging, according to these clocks.
So they were aging more slowly. That's incredible.
It is a pretty amazing finding.
So where can we get more C15 in our diets? Are there specific foods?
Naturally, C15 is found in full-fat dairy products like milk and butter, and also some types of meat and fish.
Okay, but is it enough? Are we getting enough just from food?
For most people, probably not. The typical intake from diet alone tends to be pretty low.
I see, so that's why they're looking into supplementation.
Right. Scientists are definitely exploring C15 supplements as a way to increase our levels.
That makes sense, but there's an important caveat here, right?
Absolutely. Even though the early research in both animals and humans is super promising, it's crucial to remember that we still need more long-term human trials.
To confirm it's safe and effective.
Exactly. We need to see how C15 affects people over extended periods of time.
So it's early days, but exciting nonetheless.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's bring it all together. What are the key takeaways from our deep dive into C15?
Well, C15 is definitely this unique fatty acid that's making waves in the longevity and metabolic health worlds. The evidence we have suggests it might be beneficial by activating AMPK, inhibiting mTOR, supporting healthy mitochondria, and even improving key metabolic and cardiovascular markers.
And that dolphin study was just the beginning.
Right, and then all the research that followed in animals and humans,
Yeah.
it's all pointing to something really interesting here.
And the fact that it seems to work in similar ways to metformin and rapamycin, that's huge.
Absolutely, but as we've said, more research is definitely needed.
Right, but the early findings are certainly promising.
They are very promising.
So here's a thought for you, our listener. Based on what we've learned about C15, what role could simple changes in your diet, like adding more full-fat dairy, or maybe even future C15 supplements, play in your long-term health and well-being?
It's a good question to think about.
Yeah, it definitely gives us a lot to consider, and it makes me even more excited to see what the future holds for research on fatty acids and how they affect the way we age. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me. It's been a great discussion.